Hello, everybody. This is Daniel Lyons. This is SoBlindMinistry.com. This is the next day of the creation process. That's what we're going to go over today. We've gone through day one, and now we're moving on to day two. Hopefully, you guys are following along. Again, this does take some dedication. You can't just come in, tune in, or just hit like and then expect that you're going to gain the understanding. This does require a little bit of legwork, especially if you want to make this a part of your own understanding. The Bible refers to truth as being treasure, and basically treasure must be uncovered. Treasure is not something that's just given to you. It's something that is uncovered within yourself. Some of the ancients used to refer to as a pearl, that it takes a lifetime to find this great pearl of a great price, but it also, you must dive deep within yourself to find this pearl. Well, pearls are also referred to as wisdom. So if you want to find wisdom, you must seek wisdom, and you must spend the time and effort it takes to find it within yourself. And it's not just going to happen if just without doing the actual legwork yourself, without actually reading or taking the time to understand what's being said, because once you understand it, it creates clarity. And that's what these classes are about. These classes aren't about preaching happy, good feelings. We're not here to just say praise Jesus. We're here to actually know Jesus, to know God, because to know God is to emulate his son, and to emulate his son, we must know who his son is. And his son is not just the man that died on a cross for us. His son is the truth, in which was embodied as a living being. Consider that what we teach here is that that the Bible is actually two books. The Book of Secrets is a book that it's the Bible itself, but it's seen from a separate perspective of the world being you. And once you look within yourself, all these kingdoms and people are actually within you. They are truths that you have built up within yourself. And so we are trying to create the reflection of God by looking within and mastering our inner world, so that we become a reflection of God, of the outer world. And to do this, we have to understand that we have to emulate Christ, because he is not just a man, but he is truth. He is the embodiment of truth. And when we look at that, you are the inner world, that if you were to speak the word, like the Bible talks about him being the Word, and the Word became flesh. But the physical flesh came from the Word. But within yourself, remember I told you in the first day that ideas and beliefs are the people within you. And these people propagate. Your ideas and truths propagate. They grow, right? And so you are trying to create Christ by creating a lineage of truth. Consider the names in the Bible. You have look at the beginning of the book of Matthew, and I believe also the book of Luke. There is a lineage of Christ, right? And so each name is a thought or belief, right? Male names represent basically we'll say an idea or belief or truth, and women represent wisdom. It's about what is. Ideas are usually driven, and wisdom is generally refers to as a self-reflection. It's a constant questioning of myself. How does this apply to me? How do I use this belief? And that's where wisdom is. Knowledge is information. Wisdom is knowing what to do with that information, because it is how I apply that information to my life. And so whenever you see a masculine name, you're referring to a belief, and when you're referring to a woman, you're representing a self-reflection into a truth. These things to unite, become married, and they become what's called one flesh. The word for flesh in the Bible is basar. Basar has two meanings. It means flesh, but it also means like truth, or to proclaim good news, or to preach, or to teach. So we are trying to gain knowledge and wisdom and unity as one truth. When we become one truth, one unified understanding, then we emulate this lineage of truth called Christ. When we take, in fact, if you take a look at the family name in Hebrew, that the name for son, so father plus mother creates child, right? And most of the time it uses the word ben. Ben comes from the root meaning, or the same word as banan. Banan means to build. So the child builds the house, right? But your soul is a house. It's made of the same as when we talked about the kingdoms of the soul, that are all these beliefs that come together and into a very similar belief system. They become a kingdom, and they're ruled by a single primary belief. So when you're overcoming a kingdom, you're overthrowing the king so that you may master that state of being. You may master that understanding. So if you have a house, is very similar. You're going to build a house, and we're going to look at that in a little bit more in day 3. But when you're building the house, that you have in this house a man and a woman that have united into one truth, that create a belief, a new belief that builds the house. The soul is actually a house of many truths. And it's a very noisy place too, if you don't realize. Most people have many voices that are going on within them, many of these beliefs that we've heard from other people, and we build a house usually of lies because we have gained this structure that is filled with faulty beliefs. People tell you a lot of things, and these beliefs that you have formed from what they've told you have created your system that you create all your judgment upon. And often your judgments are what you will stand for, fall for, and unfortunately, if they are not fully formed, fully understood, then they lead you astray. So imagine you have a house full of voices, and these voices are all calling out at you at the same time. All of them are just saying the same thing, or saying different things. They have no heed of the other voices calling out at you. They're all just screaming at the top of their lungs, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me, right? And so we have to balance out all these voices, and we make our judgments based on those. So right now you're living in a haunted house. Your house is made of chaos, and it's very noisy. And that's where we're going to come into this this day 2, and we'll understand that son means to build, right? So we're building a house. Well, Christ is of 2 worlds. He is Son of Man, and he is the Son of God. Now, as we looked at in the previous days, that on the inner world, we are trying to emulate God on the inside. So you are no longer seeing God that you know and you pray to. At this time, you're seeing God as being the higher self, the higher ideals in which you of the mind versus that of the body. The body represents like it's the same as the sky, the waters, and the earth. The earth, on this particular case, the typography or the landscape of the inner world, the earth is made of the corruptibleness, all the things that are not, that life has taught you, that has created all kinds of turmoil within you. It's like as if it's the filth of the dirt. There's all this filth that's been piled together. But from the corruptible comes the incorruptible. So you become as though a tree growing out of the corruptibility of the things that you've known, that righteousness can grow from it, producing fruits. Fruits are a goodness, a sweetness, and if it is found to be sweet, people desire the sweetness, and there are seeds, and the seeds represent potential, and it's the same progenitive line of making children. The children become an understanding that lead to more understanding, or a belief that leads to more beliefs, truth that leads to more truth, either way you want to see it. So from corruptible becomes the incorruptible that creates more understanding. And so you'll start noticing this in the day 3, that it starts representing these trees. And the Bible talks many times about us being referred to trees, and it's because it is the growth process of each belief that creates the tree. So creating incorruptibility or truth out of the chaos. Order from chaos is kind of where it comes out to be. So when Christ is of the Son of Man, man is a thought or belief, right? The extent of your understanding. And in fact, each one of these extents has a lifespan that I start my understanding and I end my understanding. And somewhere in between, I have created new understandings. And so my seed of my tree has grown from incorruptibility. It has sprung forth, and in the fullness of the blossoming of this truth, that it produces more truth. And when that truth has been completely understood, it ceases to be a part of growth, because it has now been understood. And so it is now consumed into righteousness. And so the tree of life continues through one life to the next, to the next, to the next, and you build a lineage of truth. So when we have the Son of God, our Son of Man, it is truths that have been built up from the foundations that we have gained from the lower self and built it up to a higher elevation. When you're going to a higher elevation, we're gaining higher understanding. All right. Now, this is all going to be about a mirror. It's a mirror of truth. And you're going to look at the second day, it's going to talk about this expanse that has covered the heavens. And it's about the land. It represents the id. This is your basic primitive self. The modern term is id. It's a little more specialized. But the basic version is that you are made of, basically, you're not, there's no structure, you're empty, and you're without understanding all the way through to the core of your being, so thus the earth is without form. So we are forming the earth into something that can be built upon, that it can create as like a tower, so to speak, or a mountain, whatever, anything. When the Bible talks about elevation, it's talking about building up your truth to the point that you can mirror that of God, and God represents the higher self versus the, I don't know if you see my down in my belly, but the lower self, and in between is the heart. Even if you see in the Catholic Church, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, it's the heart crosses the higher and lower self. The mind versus the body are divided by truth, or the spirit of truth. And this is an expanse that is represented as water. The reason it's represented as water is because water is fickle. Water does not stay constant. Whenever there's any kind of noise, remember, your house is full of noise. There's all these voices calling out to you. So if you have all this noise in you, then you are, the waters are unbalanced. This reflection, you cannot reflect the mirror of God, because the Bible's talking about us reflecting God, being built to the same image of God. And Christ even tells you, see me dimly in a reflection. It's because you don't see clearly, but later you will know each other face to face. And what he's talking about is there's two reflections. There's you on one side and God on the other, and that the two are at odds with each other because the truth divides you, right? In the truth, in the middle of the wisdom, as you apply heaven to earth, the two will then become kind of unified, or we can do it this way if you want. They become kind of a unity. And that's why when we see Christ, he's on the water, he calms the waters, because when you calm the water, the reflection becomes clear, and then you can see God reflected within yourself. And the problem is we are divided from God because of the judgments we built. If you look at the story of Adam and Eve in the garden, again, this is all about you, then you have the garden is many trees, many beliefs that you are allowed to eat of. In other words, to gain the understanding of many truths. But the problem is there's one you're not supposed to gain from, and that's the knowledge of good and evil. Good and evil creates judgment. It's not knowledge, it's the knowledge of good and evil, because in your judgment you create a barrier between you and God. And that's why the paradise is lost. Innocence is lost because you've now gained an understanding of what is right and which is wrong, which is often a time something of your own making. And this is where your life is in turmoil. This is why you're in chaos. This is why you make the same mistakes over and over, because you've developed a house dedicated to a single purpose that is made of chaos, that because this is how you thought it was supposed to work, and you keep trying to recreate what you know. A lot of us are afraid of change, and so we get married to a situation where, again, married meaning joining to the self, that we become joined to a set of beliefs that are often faulty, and we recreate that same situation because we don't know how else to exist. And this is what the Bible's about, is trying to teach you how not to be locked into faulty beliefs, but how to grow. Because if you are not growing, if your truth is not growing, your understanding is growing, the opposite of growing is dying. And so when we have the waters, when you have the Son of God building up, you have the Son of God building down, the Son of Man building up, creating unity in between. And that's thus he becomes a bridge, and that's why he can walk on the waters, because he represents a boat. In fact, when you used to get a lampstand in Hebrew, it's the shape of a boat. It has that kind of little arc to it where the candle's here and the oil's here. Anyhow, it represents a boat. And there used to be an old expression, if you do not see the light, then you're a bunch of blind fish. You got to come up into the light, because in the light is where truth is found in balance, in illumination. So we need to come out of the darkness up into the light. And so when Christ walks in the water, he's just like Jacob had a dream, and he dreams about a stairway where angels are descending and ascending. And he sees that later on, you'll see that that Christ too, when he has his baptism, that they see. Christ even tells you, he says there's a dove ascending upon him, but there's also where he says that you'll see, what does he say? Something about angels ascending upon him. And so that's what it's about. Is he becomes that bridge. He becomes the bridge between waters, creating balance within you. Calms the storms within the higher self and lower self at odds. And when they become calm, the reflection becomes clear. And in the clearness, you have transcended. Because if you look in Psalms, it talks about the sky is cast as a metal mirror, right? And we can look at the sky and we don't see a reflection of ourselves. But the Bible uses the words heaven and earth all the time. It's like 156 times in the King James Version. And so these two go together because it is reflections of the self, the higher self and the lower self. And so you need to learn how to rectify the two sides that are at odds. And so when we're rectifying it, we're creating reflection, and thus we are creating a lineage of truth that builds up to make Christ, that creates the salvation of the mind, because in fact that's what Jesus' name means. Jesus means salvation or freedom, because it is to be emancipated means to be freed. And so he represents freedom. He also says that he is the truth. So he is the truth. He is the word that has become flesh. In other words, he is the truth that has become a living truth. He has become, because remember we said that flesh, eat of my flesh. It's the same thing, meaning to become the good news. Eat of this understanding. Eat of this good news, that it may become a part of you. Eat of my truth, because he says, I am the way, the truth, the life. He also talks about, even John the Baptist calls him the truth. So he represents the freedom of truth, and truth sets you free from the chaos that you have created, and it creates balance, it creates calmness, it creates that bridge of the spirit, and it removes the judgment that you have built in your life this whole time. So when, in fact, this is where you get the essence of baptism. Baptism, we a lot of times think, oh, it's just washing away the filth, and that's not exactly what it is. The deluge of the ark is not only to wash you clean, but it's also like to submerge the dust of the earth in truth, that the truth may become basically filled with spirit, filled with truth, and then it becomes a reflecting point. So below this firmament that has been created between the higher and lower self, the firmament is a mirror. The mirror is a reflecting point. It's not a real mirror in the sky. It is a reflection of truth. It is a barrier that the lower self cannot pass over to the higher self. But if you notice that, I will make you fishers of men. I will draw you up from the darkness into the life, basically, or in the light. So you're going from death to life, because what elevates becomes living, and what goes down is the grave, the dust. You go back to the way you were, back to insignificance, back to your faulty beliefs, the corruptible, all the beliefs you had before, the empty, void earth. Do not return to that. You want to try to build up so that you may become in balance with the higher self. And so the baptism has to do not only with being inundated with truth, but also it is symbolic of Jesus being both man and God, and death and life. This is, in other words, the truth. That which was corruptible has become incorruptible. That is, what was terrestrial has become celestial. So basically, it's taking your primitive self and elevating it to a higher self. And so the baptism represents your death to how you were, because the water is bitter. The waters of the sea are bitter, and in this bitterness lies death, right? But in the sky, it is life. It is, it's kind of also, if you consider, they call it the weight of sin. Guilt brings you down. The Egyptians used to believe that when you died, that your soul was measured against the weight of the feather of a mut, I think. And basically it means that you are weighed on a scale, and what makes you feel enlightened or enlightens you raises you up, and what that which makes you weighed down, like sin, the error of sin, will weigh you down. And so in contrast, that if you are not lighter than this feather of enlightenment, then you are weighed down into death, and then you're consumed by a crocodile god. But that's here nor there. But the same concept is there, that you are trying to create elevation, not just with being pious. Piousness has nothing to do with Christianity. In fact, a lot of people live their lives trying to be the most pious people they can, but that is not what this is about. It is about knowing God. And because once you are filled with the truth, once you are filled with love, what happens out of you is only the overflow of what is within you. It is not an action that you put out, that is a reaction to what is within. And so you cannot create this illusion of godliness and still be full of confusion within you. In fact, remember we were talking about states and our cities, our kingdoms, that a kingdom is a state of being, right? And so if your kingdoms are ruled by Babylon, Babylon the Great, we've heard it called. Babylon means confusion. Look it up, you'll see it means confusion. And but you're trying to create Jerusalem, which means wholeness and peace. That's where you get also the word shalom, means peace. You also get it from Solomon, peace. And so you're trying to create, the word peace doesn't mean like, hey, peace, groovy. It doesn't mean, oh, I'm just so relaxed. It actually means to be complete and to be whole. So your whole idea is to create wholeness. And so if I am ruled by Babylon on the many waters, the harlot on many waters, wisdom is a woman. Wisdom, if it's a harlot, is not dedicated to any one solid belief. It is joining to everything. Everything's about me. And everything being about me becomes confusing. And because I'm so confused, I am ruled by Babylon. And the great city of Babylon has basically become a confusing state of being. In fact, and the Bible talks about us being, or the Hebrews being trapped for, I believe, 14 generations in Babylon. And again, confusion, stuck in a state of confusion. But we are creating righteousness, which removes the confusion, which casts down the harlot on many waters, the truth, the wisdom of truth that is dedicated to everything versus to all, everything's about me, so to speak, versus the true bride, which is unifying the higher and lower self into balance. Again, this is a family and a house. So you have the father and the child, and the father and the child. The father has goals and he has things that he's trying to do and he's trying to accomplish. But the mother she represents the center of the house. The father rules the house. The mother is the center of the house because she's everything that deals with the house. Usually it will say, like in a physical relationship, generally a man he's goal oriented, and his goals are far beyond the home. He will do anything he can, make whatever sacrifices he can to accomplish a goal. The child, generally, it's kind of like looking, I have a small dog. He's sitting in a pillow next to me here. He is pretty much the embodiment of the id, or the beast within yourself. And this is what you're trying to overcome, the God versus beast, so to speak, or Christ versus beast. That your id is the beast, right? And this beast needs to be mastered. The beast is this unruly, crazy dog that's only, that's the only way I can explain it, or a crazy child that is only obsessed with their hungers. They only know how, make me feel happy, make me feel pleased, and I'm going to create a fit until I get what I want. And that's kind of how we all are, is that we are filled with hungers. Hungers mean like your desires. You have an emptiness in you, you want it filled. The only way to fill that emptiness is to give it what it craves. And if you don't get what you crave, often you fill yourself with all kinds of empty things. And this is where you get things from drugs and alcohol and bad relationships and all that. It's just power and money and all that. It's just trying to fill an emptiness that can't be filled. You need to feel complete before that emptiness can be filled. And in fact, if you have a world and the world has holes in it, these are the pits, the abyss. And the Bible talks about all these different pits that people fall into. And that's the emptiness within you, that you are trying to satisfy something you cannot satisfy. So it consumes all these other beliefs and they fall into the pit. And so the dog is kind of like that. He's always got these hungry. He's always hungry. He always wants to beg for things, whatever else. And you always have the higher self is always complaining about him. Stop begging, sit. And so the higher mind controls the basic mind, but the basic mind has a tendency to create this chaos, but it's also a driving force because, like, we'll say I'm gonna use my dog. My dog wants to go for a walk. I gotta watch the word, otherwise he'll be like so excited. But you want to, if he didn't have that drive, I wouldn't go take him anywhere. So it's your drive leads the mind into action, and the mind can create action as well. So, but the mind itself is not action. And so the mind versus the body, they are, it's been called, in other groups, it's called the Ouroboros. It's a snake that consumes itself, that is a snake eating its tail, and it's a perpetual nature that creates the head to the tail, and it's like a rebirth cycle. And that's kind of what we're working with here too, is that we're creating this Ouroboros cycle where we are consuming the self into a perpetual state of motion, progression. But being that we're also a house, the mind and the body are in odds. And so when the father and the child that's always hungry and unruly, or my dog in this case, are unruly, and so we're always at odds. The two of us are always just, going at whatever. I'm yelling at him and he's going crazy and he's just barking and it's funny, but I'm a guy, I can only, just calm down. And then the woman represents balance. And so she is the balance, and the heart is love. The love is basically the center of the body, or the house. And she represents that which joins the two together, which balances the two out, so that, honey, you have to know that the children only understand so much. Be patient with them. Okay. And then the body is like, oh, but I'm hungry. And like, hey, you don't want to get your father mad because of whatever, and tries using reasoning. And when you use reasoning, the animal becomes more like the man. And so we need to build up the animal or the child to become as a man. And so the Bible tells us that to know God, we have to be as a child. But it also tells you later that you have to, at some point, put away childish things. So what you were building up eventually supersedes the waters and then becomes that of enlightenment. And so that's what we're working on, is creating that building process. The child builds the house. And when eventually the father of the higher self will become in balance, and then you get that new Jerusalem that overcomes chaos, because you have the waters represent, again, your spirit. It's also kind of like a flow of consciousness, and it's fickle, and this is why it gets all out of balance all the time. You've seen the Bible talk about wisdom being women, right? But the moon also represents that of a woman, because it has many faces, and it has basically, it's like kind of like saying that you have many phases of understanding. It's basically because it is joining to the self. It means that everything is applied to the self depending on how the situation suits you, and it can kind of create an unbalanced nature. In fact, so when you see the Bible talking about storms within you, it is your contention between the two sides that are creating this unclear reflection of God. And so that's why we're trying to calm the home, calm the self, that you may find balance. And the only way to do this is that once you've taken, we'll say, that garden paradise, that you were built of chaos, but you didn't know you were in chaos. And so once you created judgment of good and evil, you're now trying to create a process of recreating that new Jerusalem. And Jerusalem means, basically means peace. And so creating peace creates balance. And then that's why it becomes the city. Remember, it's a state. City means a state of being. And so you're creating a state of being that is inner light. Okay, so that's the basics behind this. It's pretty detailed, but you're trying to create a state of from death to life. The Bible talks about I die daily with Christ. That means in truth, I am renewing my understanding daily. I'm in a cycle of process of renewal, constantly growing from death to life. So the baptism, when it talks about being baptized of the mind and of the spirit, it means that not just, because in John the Baptist says, I baptize you with water, but he baptizes you with the Holy Spirit. And so that's what it's saying, is that it's taking the Spirit of God and the spirit of death, spirit of man, and creating an umbilicus, a link between the two, kind of like a mother with the child's umbilicus, is that it creates the link to, is the what connects us to God. And so our spirit and his spirit contend with each other until that we have become balanced in the truth, and in that reflection we reflect God. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the Bible, and we'll take a look at we're going to use the Blue Letter Bible. That's again my favorite book for creating balance here. I don't have it open. Give me a second. I'll bring up the Blue Letter Bible. Okay, let's say blueletterbible.org, my favorite tool on the planet, blueletterbible.org. The reason I like the Blue Letter Bible is it's not just a Bible, but it has this links to the Strong's Concordance, and the Strong's Concordance has all the translations from the Old Testament. From the ancient languages, from the Hebrew, Aramaic, and then the New Testament to the Greek. And in fact, one thing before I share this, I think you might get a kick out of. Have you ever considered why the Old Testament is written in one language and the New Testament is written in another language? Okay, so the reason being is that, if you consider the story is still Hebrew, but yet it suddenly becomes Greek. Now, there's a big connection between these, but we're going to go ahead and take a look. And this kind of Abram. I can't remember how you spell Abram. Maybe that's it. All right, let's see. Abram. No, that's Aram. Abram. Abram. Is that right? Abram. All right. So we're going to turn the Strong's Concordance over here. All right, and we'll look at Abram, because Abram becomes Abraham, correct? And so the word Abram means exalted father. I don't know if you can see that. I hope you can. Means exalted father. Now, exalted father doesn't mean to be like, oh, glorious father. It actually comes from the word basically of lofty. It comes from two words here, Abiram. It has Ab, which is like father, and then you have Run, which is to rise up, to be high, to be lofty, to be exalted. So we're talking about, again, this is an elevation that we are trying to take the higher self and the lower self. All right, so the seeds of Abraham are basically, when you put ha at anything, it basically means you're infusing it with the spirit. So we understand that the spirit is actually the mind, or we'll say truth. At this point, it's the air. The air is a higher truth, and so we're taking the higher state. Now, remember, this is a family as well. So we're not just talking about a family of a physical nature, but the family within the house of the soul, resides within your body, the mind, the heart, and the stomach, or the body itself. That which does the action, that which balances the action and creates the balance and love, and that which guides everything. So what we're trying to do is that we are taking the Father is the primary ideal that all things are built upon. And so whenever you hear the word Father, you're going to take that as being like a primary root or primary foundation that everything is built on. So whenever it talks about a father, we're talking about that which came from experience or understanding or such, because the ancient Hebrews in their writing used to use symbols. This is before we got to what we have in modern Hebrew. The ancient one was actually symbols. In the very beginning was that of an ox, and that's where you get the ah from, because it was the head of an ox. Something that became later on the Greek and then later on to like what we use in modern English, which is an A, because before it was an ox's head, and so later on turned into an A. And so there's some great studies to show you how the language has changed. But the Hebrew is pretty much, from everything I've seen, is the oldest, or whatever became Hebrew was the oldest written language on the planet. It even superdates the Chinese language and even Egyptian. But these symbols became the ox. The reason what it represents is it means to lead by experience. Like if you took one ox and tied it to a younger ox, the older one would show the younger one what to do, and it would follow. And so if you were trying to make it do your fields, it would lead by experience. And so the Father is that primary experience and knowledge that you have within yourself. And so we're going to take the exalted Father. So then remember, that's what Abraham or Abram means. And so you're taking the elevated Father, the elevated ideals, right? And then you put the Ha, and then you get the Abraham, and then so therefore you get the Father of many nations, because you're creating the higher self out of many truths. And that's so all the seeds of Abraham is that all things that come from a higher foundation or higher understanding. And so then we have the opposite. I'm going to go ahead and navigate over to, let's go and share that first so you can see where I'm going next. And we're going to go to Greek. Type in the word Greek. This is where you get the word Gentile from. Let's see if it does Greek for us here. All right. This is all right. If you go to the root of Greek is Hellenes, she was a god, but we go to the root of all this, it goes down to Hellas, which means Greece itself. And if you can see on here, it says unstable, the miry ones, miry. Okay, so what we've created then is the higher self in conflict with the lower self. So if we have the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Old Testament is about telling you how to elevate, and the New Testament is how, or it's telling you, it's like a reflection. It's physical things representing spiritual truths, and then the other version is spiritual truths manifesting into reality. So thus Christ becomes no longer about this spiritual truth, but about becoming the Word, becoming flesh. And so you have the higher self and the lower self. The first part was raising your understanding to higher elevation, and or building from a higher elevation, and then the other is elevating that which was so that the lower self can transcend as well. Because if you look at the way the Bible works, is that after Christ walks on the water, later on it talks about in Revelations, it talks about people walking on a sea of glass. Now, the sea before, they mention the word meaning to roar. So it means a spirit that is out of balance. And then when you have a sea of glass, then you have a calm water, so calm that it has become the mirror itself, the firmament itself. And because you are not in the water, that you have risen above, as fishers of men have brought you out of the water, you have transcended the bitter spirit. You've transcended death and gone from death into life, and therefore you are above the waters, and the waters are calm because you have been able to walk on them, because you have become able to balance your choices within righteousness, that you may transcend from death to life, or transcend from ignorance into enlightenment. You don't fly. It talks about you walking on this water, because it means that you are in balance. You're not overly righteous. You're not overly foolish. You are in balance. And again, that's the straight and narrow path. Do not be overly righteous. Do not be overly foolish, but keep balance. Don't be as the devil, who is both attributes at once. You know, who are you to think you can come before God? And the other side is, again, hey, you deserve this. Nobody needs to know. Hey, you know, I don't know why I did the accent, but the two together create balance. And this is your sword of truth. This is the straight and narrow path, because you're trying to go through a gate. The way to righteousness is truth. In balance creates the way. The gate means to pass through. And so Christ becomes that gate, that he is righteousness that is in balance, and because it creates a straight and narrow path. It doesn't mean to be so, again, to be pious. It doesn't mean that you have to be so righteous, because then you become as the Pharisees and you drift off to the right, and then you leave the sword of truth, right? And so you lose your way to a balance. If you go off to the left, you have obviously gone searching whatever else that takes you back to who you were. And so that's why when the Bible talks about in the book of James, where it says that a man who looks into the mirror and immediately sees his natural face and forgets and walks away, he's talking about that if you look in the mirror and you don't see the reflection of God, then you are seeing yourself and you are reflecting on you. And therefore, you've lost the truth, and you're reflecting on your own desires, your own natural tendencies, and you have walked away. And you are not in balance anymore, because you're not following the path. You're not part of the mirror. You're part of the problem, and you have drifted off into your own pursuits. All right, so we're going to go back. So you have the Hebrew and the Greek, and that's why the Bible is made of this. Everything in the Bible is built on duality. And in fact, if you look at most of the names of the apostles, most of the stories that they have, you have with Jacob, Esau, all these different people, you'll see that they're all twins, or brothers and sisters, or two attributes that are in contrast with each other, or in contradiction with each other. So in this particular case, we have the Greek versus the Abraham's, the seeds of Abraham, which create higher elevation. All right, now I'm going to go over to share the Blue Letter Bible again, so we can look at today's verse and start sharing. Okay, so today we're going to go to back to Genesis chapter 1, and we're going to do 6 and 8. And for the most part, we've done the translation for each one of these words. Go ahead and turn on the Strongs once you get there. Now, if you look through 6, 7, and 8, as it says, and God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, right? And let it divide the waters from waters. So basically, God being the higher self, Elohim, multiple judgments, the plurality of judgment. In other words, higher discerning or understanding makes it known, and we've done these translations up above, so we don't have to spend a lot of time on them. So the higher self makes known that there is a firmament, there is a division, there is an expanse in between the waters. So basically that there is a firmament that divides, a firm barrier. And again, the word, in fact, we'll go ahead and look at the word itself. It means an expanse. See, it's an expanse. It's an extended surface. It's flat. And so basically this is the vault of heaven, the waters above. That's why you always see pictures of heaven as being clouds, because these are the above waters, all right? And so we've spread out this truth that has divided our higher and lower self. And because there is this barrier, we cannot cross over from death into life. We cannot leave that which creates a dead truth within us, but we need to create a living truth within us. Because again, if you're not growing, you're dying. So growth is what we're after. We're after the expansiveness of the earth, to overcome the earth so that we may be as God, as a living truth. So Elohim, or Elohim, we're going to overcome through judgment the barrier. So there's a higher truth creates this barrier in the midst of the waters. Now the waters, we did the translation of that too before, and the waters come out to be, see, it's a dual of a primitive noun, but used as a singular sense. So water or waters, it's been two different things. Now, it doesn't really give you a full definition in here because it's not, this is, what I'm teaching isn't something that's been normally looked at by most theologians, because most people look at the Bible from an outer perspective of this is the Word of God and these are the rules we follow. But we're not seeing that by changing our perspective, the words change, the rules change, and everything is really about you. And so that you can mirror God and not try to be righteous, but actually become righteous because you have corrected the truth within you. That means, again, righteousness means correct. So righteous, to become correct, to become truthful to that what is true. All right, and so 6, and God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the water. So basically, let your spirit, and we're going to say that water isn't just physical water, but it is a consciousness. It is a flow of the consciousness within you. This also represents, I guess, the mother of this house, and she is the center of love and kind of the metronome that tells us if we are in balance or not in balance. So by the reflection of wisdom, we know where we stand. And so in the waters, we're going to have, this is it also represents like transition, I believe is what it was talking about before with waters. Yeah, because it says of danger, violence, and transitory things. And so this also, because the water is a transitory thing, it also represents a transitional stage. In fact, the ancients used to believe that if you were on a boat, you would be on a spiritual journey because this represents spirit. Our spirit, God's spirit, trying to find balance. In fact, that's what the movie Life of Pi is about. Life of Pi is an infinite search for truth. And so you just, if you see it, it's just, you think it's just about a boy and a tiger in a boat, but it's really the tiger is his heart's wild nature, and he's on a spiritual journey to find out how to tame the savage nature of the lower self. So man and beast in contradiction. All right. And so, and God said, let there be a firmament. So there is, the higher self knows that there is a divisibility, and it divides the waters from waters. So it creates divisibility within you, right? And we've looked at all these already. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. All right. There's a little bit more to this, and we'll look at it afterwards. I'm going to go ahead and finish reading the next verse. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. All right. So remember, we saw heaven up above, and God created the heaven and the earth. So basically, what we have here is that you have heaven is a higher water. In other words, the spirit of higher understanding versus the spirit of bitterness, which is within you now, which is the spirit of the world below. Mouth was a little dry, I needed some water. Okay, so we have these two are now, we now recognize that there is a divisibility between the waters above and the waters below, but there is something that is dividing it, and that is truth. Truth is divided within you, and you must need to learn to balance truth. And the reason why it's also truth is because water has the ability to channel, it has the ability to flow, and it has the ability to reflect. And so all these things are the attribute of truth. These are all things that you can channel your efforts, channel the ways you believe, that it can become for a purpose. If you change your beliefs, well, like say you've been in a certain way and you've been in a rut, and so you have all this water that's channeling in a certain direction. Well, sometimes you need to change, block it up. Sometimes that's what change does. Change stops the flow, and once the flow is stopped from going to a certain way, it'll alter the water, and the waters will fill and water nurture other avenues you may not have expected otherwise. The ancient Hindus used to use it as the god Kali, that she was the god of war, because when you contend with something, something dies, but through death comes renewal, rebirth. And so it's kind of the same concept, that I die daily, that I take up my cross, that I'm basically talking about the transition itself, that I have died to the self, I've died to my old ways, given up on what I thought I knew, that I may gain something new. And it's even referred to as and the parables where Christ is talking about the kingdom of heaven, And for one, you got to understand a kingdom, again, represents a state of being. And so because it's all these concepts together as one, so this is one state. And so this state of, and then the kingdom of heaven, the higher self, higher enlightenment. Basically, it's telling you that you are trying to create higher enlightenment, a state of higher understanding. And so we are trying to find heaven. If you notice in the Bible, it doesn't talk about you inheriting the kingdom of heaven and living there, because there's that new Jerusalem that comes to earth. And so basically, it's telling you that you are trying to master the kingdoms of the world, that you may become as an heir of the kingdom. So in other words, you may master the inner self, and that you may reflect God, because you are as a child building. Child son means to build. And so you are building your truth that you may inherit the kingdom of the higher understanding, and then thus the new Jerusalem descends. And you find the bride that has descended because she is the balance between heaven and earth. Okay, so let's look at the translations that we get out of this. I'm going to go ahead and bring up today's post. In fact, let's see if we end up seeing myself on this page. Let's see. Go to today's lesson, which is 6-8. Yeah, I believe this is it here. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share this screen so we can see where we're at today. Where to go? 6-8. Bible Book of Secrets. This is not the screen I was after. Let's see. I got a lot of screens open at once. It's the only way I can juggle all the stuff that's going on. Let's see. Where did I put you? Book of Secrets, Book of Secrets. I thought that was it. Let's try. Oh, stop jumping around. Bible Book of Secrets. Let's try this one here. Red screen. All right. Google Plus is an awesome tool, but it does have a couple issues that are hard to see. All right. So we're in today's broadcast. If I push play here, you'll see me in an infinite loop. All right. So God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide waters from waters. And so we compare that judgment, discernment, vows, declares, pledges, makes known, an expansive mirror of truth to sever or to divide the transitional truth, and let it divide waters from water. So basically, we go down and see what it says. And discernment and judgment makes known that a great expanse of barrier as a reflective meeting of truth lies in the midst of transition and separates truth from truth. An easier way of seeing that is if you looked at here in this category I've added to all the older posts as well. It's basically a modern English summarization, and so it makes it a little clearer to see. And so through solid reasoning, you understand that the division barrier of consciousness lies in the midst of these two truths. So waters from water, there is a barrier of consciousness because water is consciousness and truth, and it divides via the higher reasoning. Okay, so let's go ahead and look back at verse 7. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. Okay, so we are now talking about, in verse 7, judgment and discernment makes or prepares an expansive mirror of truth that divides or separates to transitional waters which were conditionally under. It can be many different things, but this one can be used also as under the expanse from the transitional truth, which was conditionally on top of the water of the expansion, and to establish, and so therefore it is. But it also comes out to being the discernment of judgment creates the great expanse of mirror of truth. Put a little liberty in there, calling it the mirror of truth, to separate the truth which is from under the barrier from the truth which is above the barrier, and thus it is so, because it's talking about the divisibility of the self. And so look at it here, because true reasoning creates the barrier that separates the higher and lower rationale of the inner world. I put the word inner world in there because this is about your world. Makes it a little easier to understand. All right, last verse. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. Now he's not calling it heaven again, that the waters alone are that, because remember, waters were the sky was separate from below. But he's talking about the higher understanding. And those words translated into judgment and discernment, proclaim or make known, that the mirror of truth, or the expansion of higher understanding, is the higher understanding of the superego, and it pledges or undertakes. Okay, so here's something we might have missed before. The word morning. Morning basically, we did this in the first day. Basically, it means to bring to light or to seek. And so, and then second means basically to repeat or to do over again, or it can also mean transition or change. Okay, so seeking is the second or repeating step that creates that ascension process. And you can see in here it says, and discernment and judgment knows the great expansive mirror of truth as the higher understanding of the superego. But superego in there because we're using that to kind of use it as a key to understanding the higher self. And thus, dedication and seeking enlightenment creates the second stage of ascension, progression, testing, and growth. And so this doesn't become repetitive. We make the English a little bit easier to understand. And so I put a little liberty in adding some more words so it's easier to see. And so proper judgment can recognize that the source of this reflective medium is attributed to the higher reasoning. And thus, through dedication and the pursuit of what is true, you may understand the balance can be found within the process of self-questioning. For self-reflection is the second stage of the ascension process. Basically, what we're saying is that there are 7 days of creation going on, and we need to find out how to create balance through this 7-day process. Day 1 is about awareness, and I went back and I renamed some of those, and we're going to go ahead and look at those real quick if you guys don't mind. We're going to go back to, well, let's go back to where I just was. And I'll go find that first day of creation, and it takes a second to load sometimes. Didn't mean for my page to be slow. All right, so go back to Genesis 1. I went ahead and relabeled these with the modern English. We're just going to read those so we can see how these work. So go ahead and click in there. All right, so let's go ahead and just look at the transliteration final summarization at the bottom. You'll see how it changed. All right, an awakening of the mind brings about the realization of two realities that exist simultaneously within your inner world. The superego's higher self and the id's primitive self. The nature and primitive state of the mind is perpetually stuck in a state of confusion. That is without structure, empty, and lack of understanding resonates throughout the deepest parts of your inner world. Yet through awareness, calmness settles and eases the transition into peace through understanding. So basically this is talking about that the Bible talking about the world having the higher and lower self, heaven and earth, being divided, and then the confusion or the water that the earth is empty, void, without structure, and that darkness is into the depths, and it's the deepest parts of your inner world. Yet through awareness, calmness settles and eases the transition to peace. And basically it's talking about the Spirit of the Lord being upon the waters, and basically it represents to calm the spirit, that the Spirit of God is within you. Thus the mind that is purely dedicated to truth finds truth. God said, let there be light, thus there is light. So basically if you seek light, you find light. So truth is light, so we have that. All right, then we're going to go to the next chapter where I added that in, and hopefully when this all comes together, it'll make more clarity and sense. And so the mind sees that there is two parts of you, and the two parts need to be resolved. Load faster. All right, here we go. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Scrolling. Oh, really, I'm scrolling. I have these annoying ads that show up in the side there. Unfortunately, they don't fund much of this ministry, but they're at least something. One day I'll actually get enough money that I can take it out of the account. Right now, not so much. All right. And an awakened mind, instead of using the same word of discernment and judgment, or using Elohim every time of the word of God, and said, and an awakened mind perceives and considers the pursuit of truth to be the only true path. It just, I made that easier by saying the only true path because it reads better in English, instead of saying that being of correct understanding. And so I just basically said that being the only pursuit of the only true path. the pursuit of truth is to be the only true path. For it distinguishes the difference between what is true and what is false. So what is light versus darkness? It distinguishes what is true, what is not true. For correct judgment knows that awareness is a period of ascending consciousness that leads to progression and growth through opposition, because that's what this is about that when you are tested, you become refined and you become sharper or more clear. And the lack of understanding and determination reverses this progression and lowers comprehension into a regressive state unless that time is used as a period of self-reflection. So basically it's about day versus night, the period of growing versus a period of regression going back, because the word for night means like a stairwell that covers and winds back on itself. So unless you use it as that period of self-reflection, it becomes then something that leads you backsliding. Night is ignorance versus light, which is sending you forward. But it is a process. Every day goes day and night. So we need to go from knowing to what we do not know, but reflecting upon it. And thus, when you reflect upon something, it becomes a part of yourself. You have consumed it and added it to your strength. And thus, the dedication to creating wholeness of self and seeking true enlightenment creates wholeness and unity within. For the inception awareness is the first stage of the ascension process. So the idea then is that we need to, each one of these days, we're going through a process of enlightenment. Day one is awareness, that you are trying to create awareness within yourself, and this awareness will test everything you know. Day two is, in fact, the first book of the Bible is Genesis, to begin. Awareness starts in the mind. Day two is about wisdom, because the first day is Father, thus God, one, unity. Two, wisdom. Wisdom represents mother. Mother represents the second book, Exodus. Exodus means to journey, because it is about finding balance. It is the quest and questioning. Moses gives us manna. Manna means what is it? But Jesus gives us bread. Bread is truth or answers. So Moses was one Messiah, but Christ is another. One gave us the questionings that led us to enlightenment, but Christ gave us the answers that we may know how to reflect God. And so we embody Christ by starting with Moses, and the two are two balances of each other. And so if you notice, they actually follow a lot of the same things. At the beginning of the Bible talks about the process and where Christ went, and how Herod was killing the young as Pharaoh was killing the young before. And so Moses represents questions, Christ represents answers, our truth, final truth. And so that's what we're working with here, is that we are trying to, two is a journey of questioning. The questioning is seeking, because when you're seeking, you have two truths. These two truths become steps, and when you're questioning your truths, you're finding answers, and you become more than the journey. You become the sum of the journey itself, because you've acquired everything along the way. You're like a snowball. You start as a single point, and if you go from one point to the next point, 2 points, that from this point to this point, the snowball has gathered to the point that it is now the sum of the journey, and it can no longer go back to where it was, because it no longer fits. So you are the sum of your journey, and that's what your soul is about. So in Exodus, it is a journey because it is 2 steps that are repeating over and over, that I am questioning, I am seeking, and through the seeking I find. And that's why the Bible talks, seek and you shall find, knock and the door shall be open. So we're trying to open the door to the kingdom, because we are trying to find the higher understanding, and so we're trying to inherit that kingdom of heaven. All right, I think that pretty much sums it up for today. If you guys have questions, as always, leave comments below. If you guys would like to be a part of any of these conversations, go ahead and write me, and I'll see what we can do about having your questions read on the air, or we can possibly even bring you in and do full conversation. Maybe we can try to unravel some of the questions that you have. But anyhow, I'm glad you joined us today. Please join us next time, and we'll look at day 3, and you can start seeing the growth process itself. All right, thank you, and thanks for watching.